Hey, hi. Welcome to Brave Indigenous Conversations with Joan Jack. I'm Joan Jack, and my guest today is Chief Derek Nepinak. But before we start, I'm going to read a piece of writing that I've found when I started the podcast last year because it really speaks to me. So I'm going to read that. Sorry about those who are watching on YouTube. I'm going to look down. An invitation to a brave space. Together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere, and we call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together. And we will work on it side by side. That was written by Mickey Scott B. Jones, who is a Black activist, a woman in the United States who's gone to the spirit world. So, those of you who are following my podcast know who I am. I'm not going to bother introducing myself. And I just like Chief Derek Nepinak to introduce himself.
Good afternoon. Bonjour nichiwa ben makwa Indigenous makwa and totem. Nino gimakan minagozi bien Anishinaabe, minagozi bien Doji. I'm Derek Nepinak. I'm the current chief of the Minagozi Anishinaabe. We used to be called the Pine Creek First Nation, and before that, we were the Pine Creek Indian Band. The evolution of the name as we get more and more fancy in English, we move back to our Anishinaabe recognizer. And I think that's important because it demonstrates our effort to try and reclaim space, reclaim our language, and move forward in a good way. I was first elected chief in 2008 after I graduated from law school in Saskatchewan. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Alberta, and I did a first-class honors BA in Native Studies. And I've been chief on and off since 2008. I took a break for 4 years after I finished my second term at the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, where I was the Grand Chief from 2011 to 2017. So winding down my term at home. It's been a 4-year term, and I'm now within a few months of the end of my term here. So it's been a great run. I've learned so much. I've come across so many beautiful people along the way.
Miigwech. So, should I call you Chief or Derek, or what's your preference?
Joan, you call me whatever you want. You've ridden on motorcycles with me thousands of miles. You can call me whatever you need to call me.
Yeah, I won't call you some of the names I've called you on the bikes anyway.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'm
This
going
is
to
a
call you
family
Derek.
show.
I'm going to call you Derek. No disrespect for your office of chief, but I know you're a humble man and prefer just being called Derek. So I invited you here today, Derek, and I really appreciate. See, I'm having a hard time not calling you Chief. I really appreciate you accepting my invitation. Like, I know all of the chiefs are super busy, and you in particular are really busy. So I want to acknowledge and value your time, and also that I was thinking about it before we started, like about you, and I think Meadow, your daughter, is how old now?
14.
14. So I met you right around when Meadow was born. So in the 14 years that I've known you, I was thinking about it this morning, and I was thinking, Derek has consistently lifted up women, consistently. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. You're one of the male leaders in my life who has taken me seriously, has not dismissed me, has always listened. And I don't even know if we've ever disagreed, but I think if we disagreed, it would be okay, And
Yeah.
like I just really want to acknowledge you for that. And on the West Coast here, they lift up their hands, lift my hands up to you. And I wanted to start by doing that because
I appreciate that.
that's not always my experience. Go ahead.
I'll add that I know that because I'm a male in a leadership position in the community, that you know, a lot of us can be painted with the brush and cast or characterized in a certain way. But I think I appreciate that that recognition, Joan. And you know, I voted for Joan when I voted for you when you were running at AFN. And
Oh, thank you.
you know, like I look back on who I voted for when it comes to regional or national politics, and
Mhm.
the last time I cast a vote for a man was in 2009.
Wow, eh?
Every regional or provincial or national vote that I've cast since has always been for a woman in leadership.
Wow.
So I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to set myself apart, but I recognize leadership where it's at, and
Mm.
I've seen a lot of very strong women in leadership step up for the right reasons, and I've done my best to support that. But I think, you know, times are changing. Yesterday we elected Grand Chief Kyra Wilson, and
Yes.
we saw a lot of chiefs step up and support her vision, and I'm excited to see where that's going to go.
Me too. Maybe if we have time at the end, we can circle back to that.
Sure.
So I invited you here because, I watched what was happening to you in the social media, and I feel kind of bad about that too. Like I didn't weigh in very much to defend you or get into the fray and around the cows and plows. But before we talk about that, I think we should talk a bit about share our views on how we each see treaty rights and um, what is happening with things like the cows and plows in the context of our view of treaty rights. So I'll let you start.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I have an undying faith in the strength and the power of the Anishinaabe people. I believe that we come from great nations, that that the greatness of our nationhood exists in our bloodlines, and it goes back
Mm,
thousands of years right here in our
mm,
homeland. And there's nothing on paper that can start anywhere on Turtle Island that can take
mm,
that away from us. It will
yeah,
always be there.
yeah.
So when I think about treaty, I think about our obligations, because when we talk about, for example, the honor of the crown is observing what honor is in our existence as Indigenous people, in what we do and how we conduct ourselves. That's where
Mm,
honor exists, and they're learning from us because they're not from here. You know, even if you've been here 100 years, that you just got here yesterday compared to how long we've been here. And I've said before, you know, we have moccasins that are older than Canada's Constitution. So I think that's important. It's important to know the strength and the depth of our roots here in our territory. So I have this undying belief that when we make agreement and we solemnize that agreement with our ceremony and with our law and with our pipes, nothing can break that. And that's the teachings that have come to me from people like our late leader, Tobsana Kwariban, you know,
mm,
from Treaty 3. You know, people like that who have given me the guidance to say that no man, woman, nothing in government can ever break the treaty.
mm,
It can be twisted and it can be shifted and shaped, but it can't be broken. And I've
mm,
lived by that. So that's what I believe treaty to be. I don't believe that, you know, the treaty is something that Canada can give us.
mm,
Our rights are not something that they control or that can be given. It's
mhm,
something that we control. It's something
mm,
that we take and something we exercise from the space of our ceremony and our prayers.
mm,
It's all there. It's all there,
mm,
and it can't be taken away. So
mm.
that's where I start from.
Yeah. I'd like to just jump in here. And so that's also my view. When I was in law school, I'm not a fluent speaker of our language. I mean, I can do conversationally, like, don't talk about me because I have that kind of language skill. But, to get to the philosophy and law, like Tobasana Kwatiban you mentioned, that's for those listeners that don't know, that was Wab Kinu's, Premier Kinu's father. And it's funny, I just thought of it now that I met him in 1992, and I was also called to the Manitoba Bar with his sister, Diane Kelly, in I don't know when that was, long ago, 30 years ago or something. But I met him in 92, and he like, in our lives, certain people change your life forever. Like, he changed my life forever. And so when I was in law school, I called my father, who is the son of an immigrant. but Dad was born in Little Grand Rapids, Manitoba in 1934, at a time when the language is still strong in Little Grand Rapids, but everybody only spoke in Schnabemo, and that was it. And so Dad spoke like really high soda, we grew up calling it. There's all kinds of whatever. So I called Dad, and I also called my mom and different speakers when I was learning about these concepts in law school to see what was in the language, because the source of our philosophy in law is always in our language, just as with English, the law is in their philosophy and language, so is ours. And so when I called home, Dad said to me, "Kitipin tesosha," and I knew ki was, me, like, and osha is I should know. And I said, "Okay, I don't know what you said in the middle." And he said, "Oh, Scruff," he used to call me Scruff. He said, "That's such a big thing." And so we had many hours of conversation about dependentes. And easy way to translate is that I own myself. I own myself. I'm sovereign,
Mm-hmm.
Kitipentes. And Kitipentes o men, he said, also goes, Dependentes doesn't exist without Dependentismen. And together we are all responsible for each other and sovereign together, eh? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in a household where, and like my mom, people who know my mom, like my mom she's so amazing. She's 85. She just went for Reiki the other day. Like she's so out there. Mom is so strong, And I was raised in a household where I wasn't told that I wasn't a boy, that I couldn't do certain things, I was raised in a home where I learned to do whatever I felt like learning to do. And so as I've grown in my understanding of myself, it's translated into the same understanding as you around the source of treaty rights. I am the source of my treaty rights. They are
Mm-hmm.
in me. They're not in any paper. They're not anywhere. They're in me. And so they
Mm-hmm.
are what I say they are. And they are what I'm willing to put my life for, in my everyday living, eh? So it
Absolutely.
sounds very dramatic and, theatrical, but it's true. I also live with a
Mm-hmm.
Tlingit man for 32 years. We've been married. And, and I'm not espousing violence here or anything. I'm just saying, when you own your land, you are your land. And I have watched my husband be prepared to give his life to defend his territory, and yeah, so I know I am the source of any treaty right that I assert. And
Mm-hmm.
they're not all written down. They're not all written down.
They're
So
not.
that's
Absolutely.
how we see it, because they're not even called treaty rights. They're my
Mm-hmm.
human rights as in Schnabel, and we
Mm-hmm.
call them treaty for the purpose of making relationship with the people who've come to our land. Because
That's right.
internationally or globally, the treaty is the form which nations make arrangements to live together. And
That's right.
so it's really what we're talking about here are our human rights. And at treaty time, some of them were documented, and in other areas, some were probably offered by the settler community because it was from their perspective, you know. So maybe bring that round to, the what we're commonly calling the cows and plows now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I agree with what you're saying completely, Joan. I agree that most of the treaty was never written down.
Mhm.
Um, who we are in the exercise of our inherent rights. We are the people that live together, and how we live together. It wasn't written in treaty. It wasn't even observed by the treaty commissioners.
Mm,
So you can't look to that for answers about who we are and how we've been. What we agreed to, even that is up for interpretation. And I long for the day when we can come together as treaty people and actually put some of these ideas down to find consistency,
mm,
and how we look at these things, so that our young people who are joining the conversation, who are passionate about who they are and what they believe, can put it into the context of what we know already. And
mm,
what we know already, I think, can carry us a long, long way. But as long as we have these disparate pieces of understanding all over the place, where people are, some of them are militarized, some of them become fundamentalist in this way, some of them that way. We're so spread out. all we end up doing is fighting one another within our treaty space because we can't find consistency in how we look at these things. And I guess in some ways it's good. It's good because it keeps the conversation going. But I sure wish we could find, kindness and friendship within our treaty to work together in a good way. So
let me just interject with a moment from Tobasana Kwatiban, if I can, about kindness. Okay, so we were on our way to Red Lake, Minnesota, because he was taking me down there to go to Metewin ceremonies. And I was saying Kichimanitu, and you know how he was, and he had a little car. I don't know, I never really seen him with a little car another time, but it was like a little Nissan, and so we were quite close to each other. He was a big man, and he said to me, "Are you a Ojibwe?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." And he said, "Well, why are you saying Kichimanitu?" And I said, I don't know. That's because that's what I was taught to say." He said, "That's not how we say it." I said, "Oh, okay. How do we say it?" And he said, "We say Kije Manitou. Kije Manitou." He said, "Kiche is big." He said, "That's other people's idea of a god that's big." He said, "Kije is kind. Kije Manitou, kind spirit." And
I remember that teaching.
that's what's missing in our own lives, in our own communities, is that understanding that our worldview is based on the philosophy and truth that the creation is kind, and to be like the creator is to be kind. So, little interlude. He must have joined us.
Well,
Okay.
when we think about the agricultural benefits within treaty, and in our case, we're a Treaty 4 community primarily because we have ancestors and original families within Minagozi B that were at the Treaty 4 negotiations. They didn't sign treaty right away. It was in the second year when the commissioners came back that some of our families joined adhesion, and then requested a reserve at a place called Duck Bay. And the Duck Bay Reserve is not in where current day Duck Bay is. It was in a different location, a little bit further north and a little further west. But the issue is that we were perfectly fine fishing and hunting. We were okay picking berries and living the way we were. So agriculture and shifting to an agriculture or agrarian type of economy or settlement wasn't huge or wasn't high on our priority list. It was something that we saw happening around us, but it wasn't something that we were going to live or die by because we were already very successful and wealthy in what we were doing. We were okay. We didn't need to, draw from the white man's wisdom on the plains, learning how to raise cattle or crops. It wasn't a huge thing because we had survived for thousands of years the way we had been living already. So who is anybody to come and tell us how to live? That's what I believe, right? So fast forward to this century, and suddenly people start asking, did they fulfill their obligation? Did they fulfill that debt that's owed to us when it comes to agricultural benefits, or what's now called cows and plows? And sure enough, they didn't. They didn't follow through. And when we think about it in that way, it's a debt owed to us from early agreement in the treaty, right? So that's how we contemplate what this cows and plows is. But it's subject to treaty. It's not in exchange of treaty. It's not in extinguishment of treaty. It's not in termination of treaty. It's not in exchange for land, because I don't know of any cows and plows agreements where the day after it was signed, the reserves are smaller. I don't think that there's a single community that says, yeah, we signed cows and plows and now we lost half our reserve. No, that has not happened. But that is the common fear and the common conversation that's out there, unfortunately.
So the criticism, though, is that we need to get into a bit of detail here for our listeners. And I also want to say, those of you watching live on Facebook or YouTube, if you share this live now while it's being broadcast, then more people will be able to see it on their pages. It's just how social media works. So if you're watching on Facebook, share it. And so I was going to say, what was I going to say? It went out of my head because I thought about Facebook. Hang on now. Okay.
You were thinking about more specifics in terms of.
Yeah, I was. Oh, I know. Okay, thank you. That came back. So I was thinking about like the criticisms of the actions that are being taken by the nations who are moving forward with cows and plows, that it's extinguishment. And I think the source of that, I'm in agreement with you, by the way, that this is simply a question of fulfilling a promise, a legal promise. It's a legal obligation that wasn't met. And we'll talk more about that. I have another example. But it's happening though in the white law under the specific claims legislative process, right?
People need to understand specific claims is both a legislative process, but it can also be an exercise of political will, which
Okay.
means it doesn't have to go into the specific claims tribunal if there's a
Okay.
government in place that's willing to settle a negotiation.
Okay.
That's the expedited process you're referring to.
Okay, so we'll talk a bit more about that again. But so Minigo CP First Nation, you took your claim through the specific claims process?
What we did was we launched our claim years ago.
Okay.
Okay, but then in what happened was in about 2016 or so, we started doing the historical research and
Okay.
we submitted the claim. We found that we thought there would be a lawful obligation. Canada put it on the shelf for 3 years, came back, yeah, we owe you something. So we're willing to negotiate rather than kick it to the specific claims tribunal. We will negotiate with you, and
Okay.
we were willing to look at what they were offering. It didn't mean that we would settle. It meant that we were willing to talk to them and see what they had to say.
Okay.
Because if it came back unsatisfactory, then yes, we go into the courtroom. But no, we didn't have to do that
Okay.
in our case.
So those nations that are so then there's so what I'm getting at is under the specific claims legislation, um, I'm not familiar with it anymore. It's been a long time since I've been in law school or even looked at that legislation. But the whole notion of extinguishment as a legal requirement has been a big thing out here in BC, where, First Nations, excuse me, like we can all read and write now, so like no one's going to be extinguishing anything. And even, well, I shouldn't have said that because I don't think we extinguished anything back then either when we couldn't read and write. But um, so the whole extinguishment thing comes from it's not relevant. It's not relevant in your situation. And then if there is any extinguishment required, another way to say it would be that if I promised you that I was going to give you something, I was going to give you this ring, and then I didn't give you this ring, and then once I give you the ring, you indemnify me, or you say, okay, you can't come and ask me for another ring. And I think that's a concern that some people have too, even in the cows and plows space. That what about the ongoing maintenance of farms, and if there are because there are First Nations that are actually engaged in farming very successfully, even at
Mm-hmm.
contact in the lower parts of Canada, maybe not so much up at Minnegoseepee or Barons River, where I'm from, not that many farmers because it's rock. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but there are nations that are in farming spaces and were agricultural historically. And so do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, we're successful farmers. We were before cows and plows, and we are still today successful farmers in Pine Creek, in
Oh.
Minnegoseebee, because we have a number of bison. We grow hay, we cut hay, we feed them, we water them, we cull, we feed the community. We have a successful farming operation. It didn't
Mm,
disappear the day after our agreement. In fact, we have the resource to build it out if we want to.
mm,
So the thing is that if you accept a cows and plows agreement, it doesn't mean that you can't go back to government in the future for assistance if you needed assistance. Like look at every single farmer who's out there in the Western Plains.
true,
They're constantly
true,
going to the government looking for
true.
investment money to expand. They're
Canadian
going
farmers.
to
Yeah,
Canadian farmers. Yeah, they're going
yeah,
to provincial governments for crop insurance.
yeah,
They're going for grants. They're going for forgivable loans. There's a
yeah.
whole economic system tied to that. And it doesn't become extinguished because of the one time payment. It's always there. It's
Okay.
just a question, are we going to access that or not? And maybe we will, maybe we won't.
Hmm. All
You know,
right.
it's
So some of the other controversial, not necessarily, with you, but some of the things I've seen on social media have to do with the payouts. I know there are some of our people who say, okay, I'm the descendant, if my nation gets $10, I want the whole $10. And then there's other people who say, yeah, no, I'm the descendant, but I want to make sure there's some for my descendants. So if it's $10, I only want $4 and keep six, for future generations. And share, if you wouldn't mind, share with us how some of those discussions happened in your nation.
Well, we sat down early on with our legal representation, and they were putting out numbers for what's called the per capita distribution. So, in a global settlement, which ours turned out to be 207 million, how much of that are you going to put out as a per capita
Mm,
distribution to every single member? And
mm,
that's on reserve, off reserve, man, woman, child, elder, everybody.
mm,
It started out, well, 10,000. The
mm,
lawyer was kind of on the low end, and I thought, well, okay, well, maybe you know what, people might be okay with that. And then, I sat on it and I thought about it. And I pray on these things too. And what
mm.
came back was, you've got to do better than that. So one day I went into the negotiation table with our lawyer, and I said, I want as much as we can get out that's reasonable to
Mhm,
individual family members, because some families have been financially impoverished due to the
yes.
economic systems that we've been operating in. And if they can have
Mm,
one day of freedom,
mhm,
financial freedom,
mm,
let's give that to them, because they deserve it.
mm,
They're living this generation, and we've inherited generations of poverty or financial poverty from the economic systems out here. So I bumped it up to 30,000, and I think
mm,
that set a bit of a precedent in the cows and plows settlements in Manitoba anyway.
mm,
And that was the thinking. But it's important to leave some in the hopper. Okay,
mhm,
leave some in trust for future generations. um, Anyone who was 18 or under, their money went into a trust. And when
mm.
they turn 18, age of majority, they'll receive their 30,000 plus interest
Okay.
that's accrued up until that day. So we have the list. We've got the entire list of eligible 18 and under, your 18 and unders, who will get their $30,000 payout. We've got that right down to the moment they're going to receive their money.
Mm,
So that's not hard to do, because you work from your band list of your existing members when the settlement came through.
mm,
Now, the other side of that is called the legacy trust, and that money sits there invested in high yielding Canadian investments and international investments that are going to make money for future generations. We're not going to deplete that trust. It's going to sit there, it's going to make money. We're going to be receiving a little bit of the income every year from the investments made. And from there, we will grow our community, and we'll try to establish a really solid economic foundation, because that's what our communities are missing.
mhm,
If you put out every dollar to all your band members, where are they going to spend it in the community? They're
mhm,
not. They're going to
mhm,
go to West Edmonton Mall. They're going to go to Polo Park Mall in
mhm.
Winnipeg. They're going to go to Cabela's in Winnipeg. They're going to go to Bass Pro Shop outside Calgary. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to go to Dauphin, Swan River, and buy stuff at Walmart. And all
Mhm.
we're doing then is propping up rural and urban retail economies. We're not building our own economies if we do
Yeah.
that. So we have to make smart strategic decisions with the resources that we have.
Can you share, are you able to share a bit of the, like, on the pot that was kept for future generations? Is there and I'm assuming too that the investments that you're making, guided by your trustees, who are probably, I'm sure they're band members and maybe some people with the knowledge about these kinds of things. But the interest that you're going to be making off of the part that's withheld, what kind of numbers are you talking about? You must have gone through all the projections in the negotiations with the financial people that were there advising, and like
Yes.
roughly what kind of money is that going to bring in for ongoing development in your community?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, Joan,
No, no.
but we did sit down with an actuary, and these
Yeah.
these people are financial experts. We did do a competitive bidding process to find out who was going to be the corporate trustee. We
Mm-hmm.
did do competitive bidding for who is going to be our investment advisors. And
Mm-hmm.
our investment advisor is TE Wealth. They're well known across Canada. They have a massive portfolio that they advise on. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, they helped us pick who the investment managers are going to be. And we picked two different investment managers. One of them is growth oriented, the other one is value oriented, which means that
Okay.
they're going to be a little more balanced in their approach. Our trust allows for a balanced portfolio, so some high risk, some medium risk, and of course low risk, as well as cash to be able to
Wow.
meet
So
our
amazing.
pay. So
Yeah.
it's a very complex system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we picked some of the top performing investment managers over a 5-year period in Canada. So we're happy with who we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's creating millions of dollars a year in growth,
Mm.
and some of that growth gets paid out through an annual distribution, an income distribution protocol, it's called. So
Mm.
we want to get to a point where we're having a representative community committee determining how to disperse
Right.
that revenue coming out. So priorities are education, housing, health, local infrastructure. We need better water systems. We need better sewer systems. We need to
Mm-hmm.
build houses and homes for people. We need to take care of our elders. Those are all the priorities that are enumerated in the trust agreement, and we have to bring life to that. And it takes time. It's not
Yeah.
overnight. It takes a bit of time to get structured.
So you did this work, like you're a trained lawyer, and your background in Native studies and stuff. Like you did this work with your council as well, and probably some of your senior management in the nation.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is not a one person effort. This takes a lot of people. It takes previous leadership who had the vision as well.
Hmm.
So I commend people like Karen Batson who spent the money to get the historical research done. Even though it was a long shot when this claim was brought forward, she
Mm-hmm.
agreed, with her council to say, well, let's spend the money to do the historical research to see if there is a claim.
Mm.
And leaders from the past who knew that something was wrong, who knew something was owed to us, and have
Yeah.
and lived their lives that way.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up another example, like because I was really, like I said, I was really disturbed with how viciously you were attacked personally in the social media. And I just want to say to you now that I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry that I was quiet. I was very confronted about why am I so quiet? Like, why am I, and that's a whole nother podcast, but I just really want to say I acknowledge that, and that your leadership and the ones who go first. I think of the trail all the time with my husband. For the first 8 years I walked that trail through the mountains with him. He walked in front of me with a machete, and all of the bushes hit him, that he didn't get, so that I could walk freely behind him. And that's what you've really done, Minigo CP, all of your team. That's what you've really done for others who are coming behind, and those who went before you did that for you. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. And I was thinking so hard about this whole extinguishment thing, and that argument around it. And then it occurred to me one day, I thought, oh my goodness, this is nothing different than the treaty land entitlement in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And I don't know if they
Mhm.
have treaty land entitlement in Alberta, but
They
the
do.
treaty land entitlement, just for the listeners who don't know, again, it was a treaty promise, and I don't have the facts or whatever, I'm just talking about the concept here. Under the treaty, the signatories and their descendants to the treaty, at treaty time, only at treaty time, were promised X number of acres per family of five, let's say. 161 acres per family of five, or something like that. I don't know. You'd have to look at your own treaty to see what it says. And then some of our past leaders, I don't know how involved Ovid Mercury was, other people in Manitoba, realized, hey, we got ripped off, and a whole bunch of research was done that showed that, for the most part, the research that was done showed that people didn't get what they were promised at the treaty time. And so then that led to I think there's 21 First Nations in Manitoba that have treaty land entitlement claims, or, had to put forth their claims and do their research. And um, now that's resulted, some of you listeners may hear, like, you can go right behind Polo Park, and I think Long Plains First Nation, I might have this wrong, but I think Long Plains First Nation bought that whole city block there, that one block off Madison there. And there's a Petro-Canada there now, and then there's Yellow Quill College there, and there's a hotel, a Wyndham Hotel there, and that's all an urban reserve. And that comes from the money that Long Plains First Nation negotiated to have the federal government fulfill on the promise of land at the time of treaty. And that's similar to this with the agriculture.
Absolutely. I've drawn parallels between treaty land entitlement settlement and agricultural benefit settlement as well. And people that are a bit aware of the two processes, I think, generally agree that it is about the fulfillment of an obligation. Some people will say, well, I've even heard one lawyer talk about how it's extinguishment. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I don't think that that's the case, even in Canadian law. Because even if you go to Canadian law, and I'm not speaking in any legal capacity, I'm just speaking as an observer who reads case law once in a while. There was a case in Alberta, Sturgeon Lake Indian Band in Canada. It goes back to 2016. And in that case, Sturgeon Lake asserted that treaty land entitlement was extinguishment of the treaty, and the judge disagreed. So even the state of Canadian law is that this is about fulfillment. The decision that came out was that, properly understood within the context of the surrounding circumstances, the release does not extinguish treaty rights. It represents the community's agreement that the rights related to land under Treaty 8 have been fulfilled. So, and then you look at other, commentary that's out there, and I think Saskatchewan Treaty Commissioner recently spoke about agricultural benefits in the same context. This is about the fulfillment of treaty obligations. It's not about termination or extinguishment. So it's about dueling narratives and dueling ideas about what's right and what's wrong. And I'm going to validate people who did lash out at me. I'm going to validate them. I'm going to say, that's your truth. You live with your truth. I have to accept that is your truth. I'm not going to engage and argue and debate with people who are living their truth. I just simply work from the facts that I read, the life that I've lived, and the teachings that I've grown to understand, to live my life the way I do.
And on that point, Derek, I want to bring up a conversation you and I had, because I was really disturbed that my friend was being attacked. And I said to you, how, like under the Indian Act, a majority of those eligible to vote have to participate on the first vote. I mean, it's more complex than this, and so I remember I said to you, what percentage of your eligible voters participated in this vote? You remember what you told me?
Yeah, it was in excess of 70%. So I can't remember the exact number once again, but
that day you said to me 78%. I was like, what? And then I said to you, okay, 78 out of, let's say you had 100 members, 78 out of 100 participated in the vote. And of those 78, how many said yes to what had been negotiated by their chief and council?
98%.
98%. So I'm not that good at mental math, but that's like 7 people said yes, out of 100. That's amazing, Derek. That's amazing. I mean, frankly, we can't even get a band meeting in my community, never mind a 78% participation rate in anything. So I just really commend your community. Is there anything you can share about how you got that level of participation from your community? How did you get 78% of your voters to participate? Not just because they were going to get $30,000. I'm sure it's not that simple. I mean, some people would be motivated by that, but not everybody,
Oh, certainly not everybody. But what I'll say is that early on, even when we thought we'd get an opportunity to negotiate, we put more money into the band registry office to ensure that anybody who is eligible, make sure you get your status numbers done. Make sure you register your children if they're eligible. Make sure if you want to transfer in because you're a lifetime band member, but your spouse is from Barons River, or your spouse is from OCN, or get them over here if they want to participate in the process. So we put in almost double the budget that was provided for them. And we populated that office, and we got so many new members. Joan, we grew by over 1,500 members in about 18 months.
That's how fast. There's another thing. Your community's leadership, your council, you and your council is not fear-based. You know, you're coming from the perspective that the cup is half full, not the cup is half empty, eh?
Right,
Like,
right.
come on home. The more members we have, the more we'll be able to increase the settlement and the
Yeah.
more people will prosper. And
The
now
more the merrier.
that's not the view. Like I heard former Chief Dennis Michie say that years ago, 25 years ago at Long Plains. I heard him say that, where, we've got so much work to do, he said. Anybody who wants to transfer to Long Plains, come on, we need people. There's a lot of work to do, eh? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I really lift my hands up to that too, because it can't be just this whole, oh, what about me? And like, no, we're not fear based. We have we have to be responsible, and anybody who has a relationship with your community should be a part of that community if that's their choice. That's wonderful.
And that's what
Um,
we did. We asked our registry clerk to make sure that there's a proper understanding of how that member belongs to our community. We didn't take just
mhm.
anybody. You
No, no.
have to show your historical connection to
Yeah,
the community, and
yeah.
that's how we did it. So we had, Métis from Dauphin who've been lifetime Métis applying for status and joining our membership.
They came home.
They came home. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And no disrespect to David Chartrand
No,
and the
no.
work he's doing, but that's what some people decided to do, and that's okay. So that encouraged people to participate. We also had very thorough community engagement sessions. We did online sessions. We did in person. We had hundreds of people showing up in places like Dauphin, Brandon, Winnipeg, and we didn't sit in the back of the room as chief and council. We sat at the front, and it
Mm,
wasn't the lawyer leading the conversation. It was us as leadership
mm,
saying, "This is what we've been able to do to bring this forward for your consideration."
mm.
We didn't hide. We didn't hide. We took ownership, and I commend the council for standing bravely and taking the good and the bad of that process, because I think that's what encouraged people to vote, and it encouraged people to look at the positive side of what we can do with this.
Mm, mm. So there's another thing that's hard to talk about, that's of concern. You know, and like I don't, my intention is not to offend anybody. And if I do, please don't attack me on social media. I'll just block you. But, uh, you know, a concern that we hear in the communities is, if you look at the settlements from the residential school, and if you look at the settlements from the day school, any of the bigger settlements, and you look at the impact that money has had in our communities, in the lives of those of our people who've chosen to use alcohol and drugs as a means of coping with colonization. Like, it's just all too much for some people. It's just easier to stay drunk and high. And then we've lost so many people. Like, people got their settlements and then they died, and was there any of that discussion in your community? And is there anything you can share around? Did you guys talk about that?
We did talk about that. We did talk about that, and it is a very difficult conversation to be had.
Yeah.
But I'll speak from it from my perspective, Joan, because I'm the only person that can speak from Derek's perspective. And I've been, I've been going, Sundance for a number of years, and when I'm sitting there in my stall and I'm looking at who makes decisions for Derek, well, Derek makes decisions for Derek. Who's suffering here today? Well, Derek's suffering here today. So
Mm,
ultimately, our connection and our responsibility and our relationship within ourselves is with our Creator. Who am I to judge what my brother's doing next to me, or what my sister's doing on the other side of the stalls? Who am I to judge that?
mm,
I'm not in a place to judge anybody for their decision. We create opportunity and avenues for people to make good decisions with what they have and what they know. That's
mhm,
part of what leadership does. But we
mm,
ultimately cannot force anybody to spend their money in a certain way or in
mm,
any particular way. But
mm,
when I drive up and down, the highway in my community, I see mums and dads buying swimming pools. I see
mhm,
mums and dads buying trampolines and play structures and bikes. And, I see young people buying a quad for themselves so that they can get to and from their friend's place on the other side of
mm,
the reserve. And, I can't say that that's a bad thing. I got to look at the money that went into the community, a lot of people spent it in the best way they knew how.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe there's more people spending it in the best way they know how than those who are squandering it in the way that we talk about, in the way that they're hurting themselves with it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a definitely a balance that has to go into it, but a recognition that I'm not going to tell anybody how they're going to deal with themselves and how they're going to spend the money in their pocket. There's consequences. There's going to be consequences, and there always are.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, you leave somebody to exercise their own sovereignty. Going back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, dependent
If
is, yeah.
if somebody needs to dull their pain by alcohol or dull the pain of their experience, by being embroiled in an addiction, who am I to step in the way of that? I can open a door and say, when you're ready, we'll bring you and help you to get to treatment. So when you're ready, we'll help you in that process. We purchased a land-based camp, for people to go and heal, to go to sweat lodge and to participate in the teachings. Those doors are open, but I'm not going to push you through them. You're going to decide to go there when you're ready, and that's the philosophy. I won't judge anybody, Joan. I won't judge anybody.
So was the creation of your healing center a part of the community vision going forward on this path?
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely it is. And we're still in that process because we wanted federal funding. Like we've done, I think 3 or 4 different proposals now to get federal money in to our land-based camp, and it's beautiful. Like we have log cabins there, we have teepees there, we've even created a small, like tiny homes around there so people can go and stay there, and we have sweat lodges. The river goes right by. It's such a beautiful place, but we can't get a federal dollar to support us in putting an addictions treatment center there, so we run it as best we can. We run programs there. We've had it's got stables as well, so we've had horses there, and we had Della Cinnabon bringing his equine therapy sessions. We've had 3 Windies out there doing their piece for healing. Like it's a beautiful place. So
right on. Yeah. So my community in Barons River is now engaging in the cows and plows in something called an expedited process. Do you know anything about that?
the when we started our claim and our conversation negotiation with Canada, there wasn't an expedited process, but it did come in very quickly thereafter. And what I believe is that the expedited process is a negotiation pathway that keeps the settlement offer outside of the tribunal so that you don't have to bump it into the tribunal and then be stuck there for years. The expedited process also means, I believe, that it doesn't sit on the shelves at the Department of Justice for 3 years. But if there's merit in the proposal and in the claim, it will become expedited under the Liberal government. This is a Liberal policy, keep in mind. This is not a Conservative government policy. So if there's a change, that expedited process that some people or some communities are now getting involved in and hoping that they'll get it through, it may be at risk. It may be at risk of a new government that doesn't want expedited claims. So that's the challenge facing expedited claims in process now.
And so the only distinction is if it's an expedited claim, it's outside of a specific claims tribunal and it's a direct negotiation with the federal government.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how are your legal fees handled?
What happens is that when a lawyer comes in and wants to help the community advance the claim and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and that there's legal understanding of the process, they have to bring a retainer agreement. And when I became chief in 2021, the retainer agreement with our firm was already in place. And what I did was I had a review of it to make sure that it was fair, because if it's too rich for the legal side, then you can take that to the court and you can say to the court, this firm is asking for too much from us. We want this reviewed and we want it brought down. And you can rely on a judge to make a best effort to make sure that it's a fair and reasonable retainer agreement. So that's how we looked at it. My review and the advice that I received was that our legal fees that our lawyer was pulling from the agreement were very fair. And we accepted that. And today I'll say, you know, when I've seen and heard of some of the other claims, our legal fees were very fair. Like we were treated very fairly in our process.
And did the fees come out of the total amount that you negotiated, or was there a separate negotiations with the federal government to cover legal fees?
Well, there's two things there. There's one on one side, once your claim is accepted to be negotiated, Canada will fund. It'll fund. I think it was 250 or 300,000 a year, maybe a bit more, to cover the cost of negotiation. So some of your legal fees can be paid out of that. If your retainer is on a fee for service, then your lawyer would be invoicing against that negotiation pot. But in a lot of cases, there's a contingency agreement in place. So the contingency agreement is based on the global settlement amount. Okay, so what a law firm will do is they will say, well, we'll receive X number percent on the first 100 million, X percent on the second 50 million, X percent on the third 50 million, and that's what our fees will be. So it's taken out of the global settlement in the end. But like I said, our fees were very, very fair, and I would put up our fee structure and what we paid to the legal team. I'd put that up against anybody because that's how strongly I believe we were treated fairly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then these, I haven't looked, so that's why I'm asking this question. And these settlement agreement, your settlement agreement, the settlement agreement, it's not just Minigo CP that's settled. There are others in Saskatchewan that have settled, and I don't know, maybe Alberta, whatever. Are they public documents that Canadian taxpayers can see, or, you know?
Interestingly enough, I don't believe in the Canadian taxpayer narrative, and I don't believe that Canadian taxpayers have funded the
I know you do, but I just had to ask.
I was told early in the negotiation that these settlement documents are for the eyes of our members. So we weren't posting, you know, settlement documents online. But we do know that some of our members did share settlement documents with people who are interested to see the structure and the settlement of our agreement. So we can't control that. You know, it's beyond our control, especially in social media world. But we're not posting our settlement agreement online. That's for our members. That's for our future generations to reflect upon. And I am planning on writing more about it as you know, in the coming months and years, to talk about, for future generations' sake, why did the leaders of this time make this happen?
Yeah.
You know, what was the thinking? What was our thinking at the time, and why did we do it? Because unfortunately, and this is one of the impacts, Joan, that we don't talk about too much, is that a lot of these claims are happening within a Canadian legal environment, because that's the only thing that Canadians can bring. Is a legal process, and the only thing that they can give us is their money. That's the only thing they can give us, right? So that's all they bring. So we try to meet them halfway. We will bring honor to a conversation. We will teach you about who we are. We will bring our laws, our protocols into the circle. You bring what you can bring. And I've said before, some people are so poor, all they have is money. You know, so we can help enrich their lived experience by letting them and helping them know who they're dealing with. Who are the people who have been here for thousands of years? Well, it's us. It's us in Anishinaabe. We've been here all of this time.
Okay, well, we're winding up our hour. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I learned in AA the meeting starts on time and ends on time, and that's my favorite thing about AA. So we've got maybe 7 minutes or so, which is a bit of time to wind down here. I just want to make sure that there's nothing that you haven't said that you wanted to say, or
we covered off quite a bit, and you know, like when I said that it's very, very important to bring your treaty, your understanding of the treaty. It's important to bring your language, your culture protocols, your ceremony into that space, because that's how we make it relevant within the treaty relationship. Is we have to bring our piece. We can't sit back and say this is all about money and chief and council are just trying to get rich and we're all getting ripped off, and you know. But if we balance how we're looking at this and we say let's give these people a chance to make right. Let's give these people a chance to bring some balance to our conversation. Let's let them see our pipes. Let's let them hear our drum. Let's invite them into our community so that they can see how we live. That to me is what treaty relationship was supposed to be about. And if we meet them halfway respectfully, and once again, that word kindness, if we meet them with kindness, they can maybe have a more enriched understanding of what their Canada is. Because we are stuck in the middle of Canada, and we're still here doing our thing.
I had a thought the other day. I'm not as respectful as, or I don't know if it's, I'm not disrespectful, but whatever. I had a thought, the Canadian state is looking for the divorce papers all the time. They want the terms of the divorce, and we're still at the prenuptial stage. Like it's like, just a minute here. We need a prenup, and we want to get married. We want a prenup and we want to get married, and they want a divorce. They just want to know what this is going to cost, and it's going to be all over, and move on.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's not that. It's about
No.
relationship. And this is our country. This is the land that defines us. So we need a prenup. Holy smokes. But
Yep.
for me closing, I just really want to thank you. I always appreciate, and I know the audience appreciates hearing from you. And what else did I want to say? Oh, I know we were going to come back to Kyra's election. And are there any thoughts around that? Yeah.
I was at the election yesterday, and the moment that the victory happened, I was immediately brought back to our late Grand Chief Kathy. It's one thing to be elected to a title. Okay, so a lot of us carry different titles throughout our lifetime, but it's whether or not that title is earned in time. And the title is earned by what you do, and not what you say, and not your media presence, and not your whatever you want to call it, not your pageantry or your performative politics. Your title is earned by what you're willing to do and what you're willing to give up for the people. And when I was looking at the work of the late Grand Chief, that's what she represented to me, and that's why I was willing to follow her. That's why I was willing to bring my headdress out and celebrate the great victory. And I was reminded of that yesterday and looking at the results of that. And we have turned a corner. We have turned a page, and there's room for very strong Anishinaabe Kwe in the circle of leadership. There was a time when not too long ago, when strong Indigenous Anishinaabe Kwe were not winning, just because they're Anishinaabe Kwe.
Yeah.
And I know in some communities it's still like that, unfortunately. But there's a harmonization and a balance in leadership. There's a harmonization, there's balance in perspective. And you know what? Men don't carry 100% of the perspective.
No,
we don't. So it's time, and it's the appropriate time, and it's long overdue, I should say, that the strong leadership and the kind hearts of the Anishinaabe Kwe are front and center. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited to see what's to come.
Me too. Just to close off with mentioning the former Grand Chief Kathy Merrick. When some people who are listening may know that I did the original litigation around the day school, and she was the only chief who wrote me a letter without being asked from Cross Lake when she was the chief there, thanking me for the work that I did. And I couldn't believe it when we got at the law office, like, what the heck, look at this, And she was always so kind to me, no matter what people were saying or what people were doing. She was very kind. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to hit end stream, and this will be posted up to I always say about my earrings, and I can't remember. I don't know if these are, maybe a listener will recognize, but I know I special ordered them from a woman. I love them. They're a woman. I think I know who the beater is, but I don't want to say because I might make a mistake. So this video will be posted at my Facebook for a while, and then it will be uploaded to my YouTube in a shareable form. And I encourage you all to share it far and wide. Miigwech for listening.
Miigwech, Auntie Joan.